Hi, my name is Mary Smith, and I am the NPD Education Program Manager for the Association for Nursing Professional Development. This video discusses the abstract submission of poster, rapid fire, and pathway presentations for the 2024 Aspire Convention. From this video, you'll hear helpful tips about submitting to help you optimize your abstract submission and understand how the abstract submission is broken down by the components of the Nursing Professional Development Practice Model. Please note, this video is not an explanation of the NPD practice model in its entirety. Please use your Nursing Professional Development Scope and Standards practice text as a guide and explanation of the entire model. Listed here are the tools to assist you in your 2024 Aspire Convention abstract submission. Use the 2024 ANPD Aspire Convention abstract submission instructions video to understand the submission platform and the how-tos of submitting. Use the scoring rubric as you are writing your submission to understand how your submission will be scored, giving you an opportunity to review your abstract in the same structured way the Convention Planning Committee will when they review and score all of the submitted abstracts. And use the abstract guide as a workbook, entering all of your submission information in the workbook first before entering your submission on the website. You'll be entering your abstract submission through your ANPD account, which has a security timeout. So if you're in the process of submitting and you pause to think or look something up, or for any reason you're not active on the site, it will log you out. If you are in the process of entering your content and did not finish and submit, your progress will not be saved. So use the guide to capture your writing and allow yourself time to get everything ready before you begin your application to submit. All of the components of the submission are found in the guide. Finally, the NPD Scope and Standards of Practice is an invaluable resource, not only for your daily NPD practice, but in your abstract submission. Once you've entered your submission details on the website, you'll have an opportunity to review what's been entered and edit as needed before you submit. Let's discuss a few tips for your submission. The first entry on your submission asks for your presentation name. Please do not enter your name here. This is for the name of your presentation, not your own name. No names or organization names should be submitted until asked at the end of your submission. The abstract description describes what participants should expect by attending your session. This is not a scored element of your abstract, but it is very important. This is what captures the attention of your scoring committee members, and if selected, what draws attendees to watch your presentation. Keep this description short and engaging. This example is just 45 words and 2 sentences, meant to engage the reader and increase the desire to know more about my work in developing and implementing an ambulatory nurse residency program. It should also let the reader know what participants can expect from engaging in my presentation. Here, you would expect a presentation about the development of an ambulatory nurse residency program that had outcomes of improving competency and competence of residents. You will likely find it helpful to write your abstract body first and then come back and write your abstract description. We know that NPD practitioners, just like the clinicians they support, are at various stages of their own career and development. So for the level of intended audience, you are sharing which level of NPD experience that would benefit most from your presentation. If your intended audience are experts in their NPD practice, in the next section of the submission, you will describe the NPD specialist competencies you'll address in your presentation. The NPD specialist competencies are found in the NPD Scope and Standards text, in the Standards of Practice and the Standards of Performance sections, listed at the end of each standard. You'll explain how your presentation addresses these competencies. If you address more than one of these specialist competencies, select those that are most pertinent to the audience and your presentation. All right, the next section of the abstract submission is the abstract body, divided into 3 elements. These elements align with the 3 components of the NPD practice model that occur in a cyclical pattern. So here, the inputs, the learner, the NPD roles, and the NPD standards, or the when, the who, and the how, impact how the throughputs are carried out and are very much involved in your process. You'll address these in your abstract submission in the first element of the abstract body, as well as how your environmental scanning influenced your presented work. The throughputs of the NPD practice model, sometimes called the Big 6, is where we mobilize the processes of our work. This part of the model describes the what of NPD work that your presentation best exemplifies. You'll be explaining your work in the throughputs of your submission in the second element of the abstract body. On the other side of the model, we see outputs, or our why, the overall desired outcomes. These are the differences that you make with your NPD work. You evaluate the goals you set for your work at the onset. Did you achieve them? So of course, you'll be monitoring and evaluating your outputs, and we'll address these in your submission in the third element of the abstract body. So these are the components that make up your abstract body. You have a total of 1,750 characters, including spaces, to write your abstract body. You can divide these characters how you feel it's appropriate and make one section larger than the other two if needed, but you cannot exceed that total when you add up the 3 sections. So be sure to count them all together and not exceed 1,750. Do this before you submit on the abstract guide so you know you're within the limits. I'm going to walk you through an example of a submission of the abstract body divided into its 3 parts. Each portion of the abstract body speaks to your educational design process. Here is where those submission tools are useful again, because the NPD standards of practice within each section of the abstract body are not only your guide for writing each component of your submission, but they're also what the Convention Planning Committee uses to score your submission. Using your tools, on page 4 of the abstract guide and page 2 of the scoring rubric, and of course your NPD standards, you'll have an understanding of what to enter for each abstract body element. Let's say I'm an NPD practitioner working in the ambulatory area, and I have amazing work to share with the NPD community because I have successfully implemented an ambulatory transition to practice program. I've used all of the aspects of the NPD process that you see on your screen here. Sounds fantastic, right? Okay, let's dive in. Let's say that my team has identified that since the pandemic, we are hiring a lot more new graduate nurses into ambulatory. In fact, ambulatory new grad hiring has increased by 43%. This is a new practice in onboarding. In fact, most of the ambulatory positions previously required experience for hire. Because of great need, job descriptions were revised to include nurses with no experience. We've updated organizational policy and fairly quickly determined that we had performance gaps in our inexperienced nurses. We were also receiving feedback from the new grad nurses that they were not confident in their abilities, nor did they feel supported, while leaders were concerned about retention of our new hires because of the lack of community and support. I'm probably focused on working in the NPD role of partner for practice transitions, right? But I also might be working in the NPD roles of leader, mentor, learning facilitator, and champion for scientific inquiry. How often do we wear just one hat? My learners are nurses new to ambulatory care with less than 1 year of experience in the program I've created. In addition to new graduate nurses, I have other stakeholders too: nurse leaders, preceptors, nurses, and healthcare team members in general. I have human resources, providers, senior leadership, accreditation and regulatory bodies, and I have our patients and families. And I have 1,750 characters, so I need to include as much detail as I can in the most concise way. Here is an example of the inputs element of the abstract body submission based on the information that I just discussed. It doesn't include everything that we discussed, but it does include the most significant aspects of this part of the work. Again, looking at the scoring rubric and the abstract guide will assist you. Now, let's talk about throughputs, where I will address the planning and implementation of this new transition to practice program. I want to talk about who I worked with and how I creatively mitigated identified barriers to get this program launched. And I want to describe the program itself and how I met identified needs. Here's a submission example for the throughput section of the abstract submission. I wanted to include more detail here about the program, so the character count is more generous for my example than the input section was, because more detail helps to better describe the program itself. We're on the last portion of the abstract body now, in outputs. Here, I want to describe the impact of my work, how I evaluated my work, and how I obtained my results. How did my work demonstrate a return on investment and my sustainability measures? I've addressed what metrics we use to determine whether our goals were met, how the program has impacted the new graduate nurses, and feedback from other stakeholders. I'm able to include additional results based on the outcomes. Again, use the rubric in the abstract guide to help stay on track for the abstract body elements. In total, we have 1,748 characters, including spaces, when I tally each of the 3 elements of the abstract body, so I'm within the maximum length requirements. If the abstract body parts were assembled, it looks like this. It can't possibly include every nuance of an entire transition to practice program, but it does stress the highlights of my program, its build, and its impact. My presentation would include more details, should I be selected to present. Now, if your submission falls into other NPD responsibilities, let's say collaborative partnerships or inquiry, you're going to write the submission so that it works best for your work. Given we are always working within the continuous cycle of assessment, diagnosis, outcomes identification, planning, implementation, and evaluation, the process we use is the same throughout all of our responsibilities as NPD practitioners. After the abstract body, you'll see a place to enter your references. The scoring rubric outlines how your references are scored on page 3. This is the only place to enter references. Do not use in-text citations in your abstract body elements. Guidelines for references are found in the scoring rubric and on page 5 of your abstract guide. They include using credible resources that are less than 5 years old, with the exception of using seminal work, and should be entered in APA format. Please note that learner engagement is a scored element of your abstract submission. See the rubric in page 6 of the abstract guide. Your audience is the Aspire Convention attendees. Learner engagement strategies must be congruent with your presentation format and the underlying educational needs that you've identified. You should select all methods that will be used in your presentation. All presentations will have a Q&A, so listing this is not necessary in this section. You may add details as appropriate for your planned engagement methods. What are you planning to do in your presentation to capture and sustain the attention of your audience and create an environment that is conducive to learning, retention of learning, and future application of that knowledge? Only list engagement methods, not teaching methods. For example, listing presentation slides is not a learner engagement method. You'll also enter the learning outcomes for your presentation. Again, this is the learning outcome for the Aspire Convention attendees. Learning outcomes are not a list of learning objectives. It should be written in measurable terms, tied to the identified professional practice gap, and convey what the learner should know, show, and or be able to do after your presentation. After the desired learning outcome, the abstract submission asks you to describe any diversity, equity, and or inclusion aspects of your presentation. This is a scored element on page 5 of the rubric, with details also found on page 6 of the abstract guide. This element demonstrates how your work is guided by Standard 9 of the NPD standards, which is respectful and equitable practice. In the abstract element body example we reviewed, it was noted that there were aspects that addressed social inequities and health literacy. However, I can expand on this here and discuss DEI aspects of my submission mentioned in my abstract body, or potentially discuss other aspects of my submission that demonstrate components of Standard 9. An example that you might see from the submission that we discussed earlier is the program provided the ambulatory nurse residents with an interactive session on implicit bias in healthcare, or action steps they might use to address digital disparities through organization and community resources for their patient population. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the submission. Remember when we talked about the throughputs portion of the NPD practice model? The 6 responsibilities of the NPD practitioner in the throughputs of the NPD practice model are used to categorize Aspire Convention presentations into educational tracks. Again, this is the what of the NPD practitioner's work. So here is where you're being asked, which of these NPD responsibilities does my presentation fall into best? On the main page of the abstract submission website, clicking on each track title will open up a description of each of these tracks. There are also subtracks that may align with your presentation. The subtracks are optional, so you'll only choose a subtract if it's applicable to your presentation. All NPD activities occur in the context of the interprofessional practice and learning environments. Select the environments for which the concepts of your presentation can be applied. Please note that this asks where your concepts potentially can be applied, not just where you applied them in your presented work. So please check all that apply. Why is this important? Because NPD work is done everywhere. Many concepts of NPD work can be applied to multiple settings because the issues they address and/or the methods they employ and/or the results they attain are not unique to a single environment. So study this list carefully when considering how your work could potentially impact and be used by your NPD colleagues. This wraps up portions of the abstract submission that are supported by the abstract guide and scoring rubric. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at info@anpd.org. Thank you for sharing your expertise with the NPD community, and we hope to see you at convention.